TBS, it has been, running all the American League games this postseason, and
Sure,
during
trying to.
they're trying to, during one of the during game one of the ALDS in New York, where Cleveland visited, they did a House of Dragon promo for the new series, House of Dragon, the new Game of Thrones spinoff, and they had an admittedly awful, like super low budget looking dragon, CGI dragon, fly into the stadium, look around for a minute, and then fly out of the camera out of the frame over Lauren Shahadi's head. And if that wasn't bad enough, I'm just going to make my opinion very clear. It was horrible. It was so bad. If that wasn't bad enough, listen to what they had Bob Costas, of all people, read off to lead into this. Bob Costas, his script, unsettling and embarrassing is what I've called it. He says, now, big sellout crowd here, but we weren't 100% sure this game was going to be played tonight. He said this with a straight face. And for more, it's shocking. Here's Lauren Shahadi. And then he sent it over to her. She's in the outfield on the concourse holding her mic. And above her in a wide shot is this terrible CGI dragon. Gosh. I'm like, and then Bob, as soon as it flies out of frame and she kicks it back to Bob, he says, I kind of feel like Orson Welles here a little bit with the War of the Worlds, right? When he was doing the radio show.
Oh, yeah.
And people ran out of their homes to actually see. That's how old a reference. See, I love that about Bob Costas. He reaches all the way back to when people were huddled around their radios and listening to Orson Welles tell an animated story, a sci-fi story about alien robots invading Earth, and they ran out of their homes to discover that it was all a radio production. It wasn't the news. He said that's how this made him feel, and I think that's really interesting.
It's funny to me because like some people were just killing Bob Costas for this whole just the whole broadcast, not the pregame, like not just that, but like the entire thing. I saw a lot of people on Twitter were like, I don't need to know about the batter's grandfather,
right,
to enjoy this game,
right?
Because he goes so deep, and I get it, like. He's an old school guy and you get it. I feel like you get this a lot more with the old school TV broadcasters, with the old school baseball broadcasters, is that they want to keep the conversation going for the entire game rather than just letting it breathe for a pitch or two. Right. And so they have those deep dive stories of like,
sure.
His great grandfather was throughout the first pitch in the first game in the Bronx when the New York Bridegrooms played the Yonkers batsman and whatever. It's just like they have those kind of stories because they feel like it's necessary to keep the conversation going because it's a 12-3 ball game and there's nothing else to talk about.
So what's wrong with that is my question.
Sometimes you just want to enjoy the game. Honestly, so much of the time I just have the game on mute because that's all I want.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because I get frustrated and annoyed with the national broadcasters really leaning heavy into the team that's winning, especially if my team's losing. But even if it's a team that I don't like, right? They always lean heavily into the favorite the entire game. And that's why people don't like Joe Buck.
Sure.
Because he does that really, really hard. You're like, oh, Joe Buck hates my team. It's like, no, it's because your team loses. So it feels like it, right? Like,
right.
That's the way it goes, and I get really tired of it. So I watch games on mute a lot of times because of that. And so I don't feel like I need it. I will turn it up if something's happening, like there's an injury, there's something weird going on, there's a challenge, like a play challenge, whatever. But other than that, I typically have games on mute because I can't hear it anyway because I got kids running around.
It's interesting. So I'm going to disagree with you. I think that more often than not, Bob Costas brings the type of information to the broadcast that I want. He brings the human element. He brings the family storylines. He brings the came from nothing storylines. Like that's the kind of palpable human storyline that Bob Costas really does well, has for a long, long time. And at this part of his career, he does it in such a way that makes me think like I'm at his house. We're sitting around listening to him, serenade. He's holding court, sort of a thing, and reflecting on his life and the most interesting people he's ever met, which are just as interesting as anybody I've ever met. And he has a way to bring them to life. So I like Bob because he's a storyteller, and I value that. I think I see your point. I understand. And a lot of people don't like Bob for a lot of reasons. And I think that's one of them. I think we just conflict on I want the storyteller, and some people don't. And that's fair.
And I get that. I get one because I want the story outside of the game. I don't want the story in the game. Like, I'll watch pregame, postgame for stories. Yeah. I want the game during the game, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, give me, like, I would rather take obscure stats from ESPN during the game. Like, oh boy, in this situation, this exact situation where it's a full moon on the third Tuesday of the month, and indoor on grass,
the first player with
472 against lefties. That's fascinating information. Thank you for that. I like that.
Do you like that during the game?
Yeah, give me that.
But you don't want to hear about
that. Tells you don't want to hear a story about the game than it does about like how his third grandfather came over on the Mayflower or whatever. I don't know. The
that's
reincarnation
interesting.
of the Mayflower,
right?
So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
and I'll get into that more in just a second. But
yeah, you will. I see what you're saying, and I don't. But baseball family, we want to know how you feel. If you're watching live, or if you're listening at home later, jump in the comments section, or jump on in the show notes, or we've been really heavy in the comment section on YouTube right now. That's probably the best way to get a hold of us. If you want to drop a line, just go ahead and drop a line in there and let us know what you think. Because was the CGI Dragon dumb? Was it great? Is the House of Dragon your favorite show ever, and you were really glad to see a crossover into baseball? Is it an abomination? Do you hate Bob Costas? If so, why?
And let me be clear, I don't hate Bob Costas. I really like Bob Costas a lot.
Right. I love Bob Costas for more than just his broadcast capabilities, though I do appreciate that.